Just enough for you to lose.
Our live streaming guy good?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Give her-
I think you were
Huh?
What time you got though? Hold on. I got you. Here we go here. Oh, 207. Okay, we're good. Board meeting to order at 2:07 on Friday, April 21st, 2017. Thank you all in the gallery for your attendance. Thank you to the board for the cooperation. Anytime we get last-minute requests like this, I understand it's a juggling act, negotiating schedules, rearranging appointments, so your attendance this afternoon reflects that ongoing dedication to the board. Now, for context, I hope that you would allow me a short preamble. Now, as chair, it's not only my role to provide guidance and leadership when the board assembles in order to conduct the important business of the authority in an efficient, professional manner. It's also my role to ensure the conduct, behavior, and integrity of the authority, which includes staff and members, are held to account and perform at the highest standard in the context of our procedural bylaws, our code of conduct, and the motions, resolutions, and direction put forward by this board. And I share that responsibility with our CAO, and it's something I take very, very seriously. Having said that, I'm going to poll the membership if there's any declarations of conflict of interest. Seeing none, can I get a mover for the adoption of the agenda? Member Kaspersat, second by Member Quirk. On to the first order of business. Okay, so the reason we are here, and again, piggybacking on the short preamble I just put forward, I'm informing the board of what I'm characterizing as alleged improprieties that have had the individual and cumulative effect of compromising the integrity of the RFP process. I have confirmed the legitimacy of the source and qualified the information that has been brought to my attention, and I look forward to sharing it with this board in the appropriate forum. So in reaching this conclusion, I ask the simple question: are the facts as such that an average person in the community could reasonably conclude that the process has been influenced or corrupted in any way? I believe they have. And in my opinion, certainly worthy of further scrutiny. The collateral damage is that there could be no confidence in the legitimacy of the RFP process, and that's disappointing. As such, I will be bringing forward to this board 2 recommendations, and we have distributed those recommendations. They will require a mover and a seconder, and once on the floor, they are debatable, and questions may be asked through the chair. Now, as per the rules of procedure respecting notice, it will require 2/3 of this membership's vote in order to pass. I will ask for a recorded vote, and at the appropriate time, Lisa will poll the membership and record your yay or your nay. I look forward to your advice, and as always, I will respect the will of the board. Having said that, the recommendations I plan on putting on the floor today, whereas the board has clearly stated that an independent consultant be selected free from board interference or influence, whereas a board member has interfered in the procurement process, thereby tainting the public perception of an objective selection process. Therefore, it be resolved that the board exercise its right to halt immediately and abandon the current RFP selection process, and the board indicates such to our partners at the Region of Niagara, City of Hamilton, and Haldimand County. A further recommendation that the board immediately repeal the Hodgson motion in its entirety, and in its place direct the chair to re-engage the Auditor General's office within the legislative framework. Can I get a mover for that?
Both at the same time?
Member Quirk, seconded by Member Kaspersat. Those recommendations are on the floor for questions or comments. I will further charge the board in a general nature. We may be able to answer your questions in a more detailed manner. This is an issue that meets the requirements of a closed session. Identifiable individual, and we are dealing with an ongoing procurement process and 4 individuals that have met the threshold. So under those circumstances, any details disclosed will be in closed session. Any questions or comments from the board regarding the two recommendations duly moved by Member Kaspersets and Member Quirk? Member Jeffs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm definitely pleased to see the second recommendation about engaging the Auditor General's office. My council passed a motion on Tuesday encouraging the NPCA to move forward with that. But I just want to be clear, though, at the end of that, it said within the legislative framework. So, you know, for my own information, and I think for anybody listening and anybody in the gallery, you know, what I guess maybe I would have liked to have seen just re-engage Auditor General's office. But so what can you just explain that?
We are an authority that follows the legislation. We intend to continue with that practice, whether it be with the provincial instruments at our disposal with provincially significant wetlands, whether it be with any other provincial policy or act. This is an agency, this is an authority that will follow the provincial legislation. If I do get the direction from this board to re-engage the Auditor General, it is very clear. We will make that re-engagement under the context of the language of the various acts that we adhere to. Member Timms.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the public is interested in how this may not be as simple as it sounds. I remember we engaged, we had the conversation with the Auditor General way early in the business, and it sounded like simply give the auditor the resolutions and ask the auditor to do the work for free. But it's never as simple as that when you're dealing with government business. And it started to get more complicated when you start to get into the details of it. And as far as the Auditor General being able to do it for free, well, she can't do it without the M&R giving her instruction to, because it's really her money, or the Minister of Natural Resources money. It's not for free. It's the Minister of Natural Resources that pays the Auditor General to do it. The Auditor General has to get instruction from the M&R. The M&R has to have a scope from us in order to do it. So it does get far more complicated than it sounded at first blush. And so the reference to within the legislative framework is to really identify that it's more complicated, and we do have to follow all the legislation in order to make it stand up to scrutiny down the road. So while it sounded simple as get the auditor to do it for free, just give her the resolutions, it doesn't work out that way in the end. And we engaged in that discussion very early. As a result of Member Hodgson's motion, we had to go through a particular process, and which is never as simple as it sounds. So this motion will allow us to re-engage, but it still won't be as simple as give her the city resolutions and let her do the job for free.
Thank you for your comments, Member Timms.
Thank you.
Member Quirk, and then Member Sheridan.
Thank you, Chair. My question to you is timing. This process has been dragging on since January. I was quite happy with the process that we had undertaken. I believe the motion was passed unanimously, and we had a standing ovation to support the direction we were going. And now, sort of 4 months on, we are doing a U-turn, and if that's the will of the board, I'll support that. But my question to you, if we give you direction to re-engage the Auditor General, how quickly do you intend to be able to come back to this board with some direction or some context of what the Auditor General is planning to do? And I say that knowing, as part of the conference call with her initially when it was discussed, what her time frame was. How quickly can you report back to this board on what her intentions are and how quickly she can come to the table?
All great questions, and my goal is to get a report back to this board 7 days prior to our May 13th board meeting. Hopefully we can have a robust discussion on what those conversations entail, and I will look to this board for direction based on those conversations with Ms. Lysak.
Okay, thank you.
No, I got member Shirton.
Mine was about timing, so I don't remember Quirk brought it up, so I'm good with what's
Yeah,
been mentioned.
and again, there's a caveat, obviously. I mean, in order to have a conversation, you need two parties at the table to have that conversation. So I haven't investigated what Ms. Lysick's schedule is. I don't know what commitments she's made. All I can do is make the phone call, if that is the direction of this board, to re-engage the Auditor General, have the chair re-engage the Auditor General, and I will hopefully set out a timeline, and I will keep the board apprised as far as what that timeline is. But that is my hope, that it could get back to this board by May. Member Beatty?
The City of Hamilton's preferred methodology was, and I believe it is, at least the mayor hasn't pushed me to go one way or the other, but he was very strongly in favor of the Auditor General, as was council. They would have taken either one, but if we're going back to the Auditor General, we're just going back to Hamilton's preference. I support it completely.
Thank you for those comments. Member Campion? See, we have to clear this up, because you always look at me like I'm forgetting your name, but I always know you was Frank. So I don't want to go, hey, Frank, go ahead. So Member Campion, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just again, well, first of all, the City of Welland and myself prefer the Auditor General. We made that very clear. And that's basically all that I can support at this point. So I think we're going in the right direction. I've seen several letters from multi-party MPPs all basically saying the same thing, that they want us to do the Auditor General route as well. So I'm a little bit concerned about the wording of the recommendation number 2, because it appears that all of the essentially local partisan groups and MPPs are saying, let's do the Auditor General. So I'm unclear as to like within the legislative framework. It's been sort of described by yourself to what that means. But what it doesn't say in here is that the board immediately repeal Hodgson's motion in its entirety, and in its place, the chair to re-engage the Auditor General's office within the legislative framework to do what?
Mm.
And I think that's what's missing from the motion. Re-engagement to do what? So unfortunately, I don't have the wording for that, but I think we could come up with it fairly quickly to perform the investigation, whatever that is.
Okay.
So I'd be much more comfortable with that part added into it.
Okay, so I'm going to answer Member Campion and then I'll go with Member Quirk. So, understanding that this is an organization that picks and chooses which legislation to follow. We follow legislation. That's the first point. Within the legislation, it spells out in very clear language what the Auditor General can and cannot do. So to your point of following that up with investigative work, if that's what the legislation says, then that's exactly what she'll do. My understanding is what the Auditor General does are two kinds of audits, an attest audit and value for money. Those are the two kinds of audits that the Auditor General does. So to suggest wording that is outside of the legislative language and outside of the mandate of the Auditor General, it basically clouds the issue of what the Auditor General's true role is and what she can and cannot do. So that's why the language is within the legislative framework. Now in that legislative framework, if she does any the kind of work that you're suggesting, then it's going to be captured in that legislative language. But to presuppose or to add language that just doesn't fit in the legislation, which the Auditor General currently follows, which the Legislative Assembly currently follows, and certainly what we as an organization currently follow, I think it moves us outside of the legislative framework. We don't pick and choose which language and which legislative act we follow. We follow the legislative language. So I hope that answers your question. Member Quirk.
Well,
Oh, sorry, you still have the floor. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, because it doesn't. I understand what you're saying, but from a more of a pragmatic mind or a more practical approach to this, my preference is always to ask exactly what I want and have somebody come back and tell me I can't do it, but I can do this, or I can do it, but you'll have to do that. So, I don't want them to close my hospital in Welland. I'm not saying, I know it's not your job, but I'm telling people don't close my hospital in Welland. That's what I want to have happen. So, again, I don't see the downside of putting that action piece in. Because I think we need to tell her what we want, and then it's up to her to tell us if she can do it or not. And if she can't do it, then we say, well, what can you do? And we'll go from there. So, those are my comments.
All right, I appreciate them. Thank you, Member Campion. Member Quirk and then Member Jeffs.
So to Member Campion's point, if you recall when we went through the wording of the Hodgson motion, sorry, Bill, you get to take the ownership of that one. What we asked for at the time was an organizational review and performance assessment, and at the time I suggested very clearly that was a process and/or value for money audit, which the Auditor General is entitled to do under the legislation.
Right.
So, and if you remember and recall those who were involved with the work we've done at the region, we do forensic audits based on what was findings of the value for money audit, and that's why we wanted to take the two-stage approach. I would accept it as a friendly amendment if it would satisfy Member Campion's concerns that the wording be added, the chair re-engage the Auditor General's office within the legislative framework to provide value for money auditing of the NPCA or any other such audit as is allowed under legislation.
That would satisfy.
That would satisfy? Okay. Now, hopefully
Lisa, did you
Lisa
catch that?
captured
'Cause I don't remember what it said.
It's a friendly amendment if it's accepted by the mover and the seconder. And
Just say it one more time, please.
I'm going to say it slowly, and I hope I said it the same way twice. Direct the chair to re-engage the Auditor General's office within the legislative framework to conduct a value for money audit of the NPCA or any other such audit as may be allowed through legislation. Is that? Okay. If that's, who seconded that? James?
Have a look on the screen.
And this is a little new little thing that hopefully we're going to start doing.
Get the wordings.
It repeats what we're doing at regional council. So
We see we need an extension cord.
yeah, or any such other audit
Any other such audit?
or any other such audit as allowed under legislation. Correct. Okay. Okay. So there is an actionable item there, Member Campion. Okay.
I'll second that.
It was friendly.
Yeah, it was friendly.
Okay. So we have a friendly amendment, and under the rules of procedure, it's a friendly amendment. It's accepted by the mover and the seconder, so there will be no more discussion on it. It has been added to recommendation number 2. Any other questions or comments with respect to the 2 recommendations? One in its entirety, and certainly recommendation 2 that has been amended. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor of recommendation 1 and 2, we will call a recorded vote, has been asked for. We will poll the membership.
Can you put John? Can you put
Yep.
just put John on
Yep.
date?
I will fill John in, hold on. And we'll get that up for you in 2 seconds. And John, we'll allow courtesy to our member Maloney. If he has any questions or comments, we'll allow them. Oh. Oh. Yes.
See what this does is we won't get an answer before the end of this term.
Is that 2/3 or 2/3 or something?
Because I need some answers in my writing before the end of this term.
We should have a call to question. Bring that up. Okay, at least you're ready.
Of course, it has been right there, but yeah.
really.
Right, she's not here. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, Member Beatty,
Yes.
Member Campion,
Yes?
Member DeFrucio,
Yes.
Member Hodgson,
Yes.
Member Jeffs,
Yes.
Member Kaspersets,
Yes.
Member Maloney,
Yes.
Member Quirk,
Yes.
Member Shirton,
Yes.
Member Timms,
Yes.
and Member Annunziata.
Yes.
That was easy.
Chair, before you adjourn,
Yes.
can I ask, as staff direction, one of the reasons why I was supportive of the organizational review and performance assessment was that was going to form the first step of our strategic plan review. Can I ask staff to take staff direction to come back with a report, maybe at the May meeting, on how we can proceed with our strategic plan review outside of the scope of this now, please?
Yeah, so I'm just going to paraphrase that. Ultimately, in the repeal of the Hodgson motion, now we are left with a hole with respect to how we move forward with our operational and performance assessment. And we'll take that as staff direction. Hopefully that's captured by staff. And we will hopefully get that back at the next earliest opportunity.
Thank you.
Seeing no other business on the agenda, I will ask for a mover to adjourn. Member Kasperseth, second by Member Shirton. We are adjourned.
Thank you.